Hilchos Tumas Meis Perek Shvi, the laws of corpse impurity, chapter 7. We're continuing our journey on the laws related to graves, structures, holes in the ground, structures above the ground that are holding a dead body inside them. And today we're going to cover three major issues. First of all, when you have a completely sealed structure and there's a dead body inside it, what is the law of the impurity that transmits? Which will lead into the conversation of Tumas Psachim, the Tumah of doorways or entranceways. What happens if this sealed structure has some doorways, has some windows? The condition of the doorways and the windows, if they're open, if they're closed, if they're locked, if they're completely boarded up, these will affect how the Tumah interacts with entities outside of it. And that is going to lead us to the final conversation of Tumah Retzutza, the idea of cramped Tumah, which we already introduced the other day. And basically it's the idea that in order for Tumah of a corpse to spread, it needs to have some space to breathe. Above the corpse, there must be at least a handbreadth of space. If it's completely cramped, then actually the Tumah penetrates even outside the structure or outside the covering, all the way up and all the way down, and we're going to see all about this in today's chapter. It says the Rambam Halacha Aleph, you have a sealed home, completely sealed structure in which there is a corpse. Or maybe it used to have a doorway, but now it's completely sealed. You didn't just board up the doorway. Uparatz es patzimov, you destroyed the beams, the door frame beams. You completely took them out. Ustama, you just sealed it. You completely sealed the structure. Mitame mikol sviva. The special law is that the entirety of this completely sealed structure transmits impurity on all sides. A person who touches it from the outside, from its roof, tamei shiva, becomes impure with the full, severe impurity of 7 days. Because this sealed structure has the law of a sealed grave. Even though it's true, this is not a grave per se, you're not planning to leave the corpse there forever, like a grave is really a place where you inter somebody permanently, but it has the same law. It's a completely closed all around. The entirety of the structure itself becomes impure. Niftach by Pesach, but once an opening was open in it, afilu stamai, even if later you seal that doorway, but it remains in the proper shape of a doorway. Imlei paratz patzimov, if you didn't destroy its beams that made the door frame, now this opening becomes the conduit through which the tumah exits, and somebody who now touches the rest of the structure from the outside or from the roof is pure. The only thing which remains impure is somebody standing in the area opposite the doorway. Now, obviously when we talk about Pesach, I'm translating it as doorway, but it means opening. Sounds like any opening kosherizes the rest of the structure. The Rambam immediately clarifies there has to be an opening large enough to be able to extract whatever type of impurity is in there. The Kama Yeshir Pesach, what should be the minimum amount of this opening? Shalem Hameis, or other texts just have the word Hameis. If you have a complete dead body inside there, Pischei Barba Tvachim, the opening that's required is at least 4 by 4 handbreadths. That's the space big enough to take out a dead body. Ukizayis minames, if it's only an olive-sized portion of the dead, which transmits impurity like a corpse, but it's a smaller amount. Pischei betefach, the only opening which is required is 1 tefach, 1 by 1 handbreadth. Now you've given me the amounts for an olive-sized portion and for a full corpse. What about in between? The gadol mikazayis, says the Rambam. If it's bigger than a olive-sized portion, there's more volume than an olive size. Harehu kemes, it's automatically treated like a full corpse. Upischei ba'arba, and the opening required is 4 by 4 handbreadths, like for a full corpse. Halacha Beis, says the Rambam, consider the following case. Hameis b'soich habayis ubay psachim harbe. There's a corpse inside a home, and there's many entrances to the home. Bisman shekulam neulim, if all the entrances are locked, kulam tmeim, then actually all of the entranceways are going to impart impurity. V'hayeshev b'tzad kol pesach mehen, and if a person were to sit outside, on the side of one of these doorways, tachas hatikra hayetze ala pesach, under the lintel which extends above the doorway, nitma, you become impure, as though from a dead body. This is called tumas psachim, tumah of the doorways. And there's a debate as to how we explain what's the logic here. Why, when they're all locked, are they all impure? One way to look at it is basically the same as before. It's a kever sasum. It's a sealed grave. For all practical purposes, this is a sealed structure holding a corpse. Every element of it is impure. The other way to explain it is with the rule that's called soif tuma latzes. In the end, the tumah will exit. Since you know the corpse is not going to stay in this house, it's going to come out. You just don't know right now which exit it's going to come out of. You have to assume that all the exits are potential possibilities. And, of course, whichever doorway it ends up coming out of is going to become impure. Since they're all possibilities, they all become impure. Niftach echad mehen, but once one of them is opened, that's now designated as the one you're going to take the corpse through. Or you didn't even open it. You just thought, you planned to take the corpse out of one of the doorways. Even if you only had this thought after the person died, after the impurity began. Even if you had a thought not to take him out of the doorway, but to take him out of a window, which was big enough to host a corpse, 4x4 tfachim, hitzel al hapsachim kulan, the opening of the doorway, or the thought to open the doorway or the window, saves all the other doorways. And now, the only place that's going to be impure is the place opposite the opened doorway, or the one you thought about, the hashar, tohirin, and the rest are pure. Why are the rest pure? Because they're locked. They're not serving as the exit for the corpse. But since you have one of the doorways open, no longer is the home like a sealed grave. Here the Rambam seems to be alluding to the first way I explained before, that the problem when they're all locked is that it's kever sasum. Now when one of them is opened, it's not kever sasum, it's not a sealed grave. Those who go with the other approach that I mentioned before of seif tuma latzes, that the logic of making them all forbidden is because in the end the tuma is going to go out. How do they explain these words? They don't explain it as addressing the current situation, that now when it's open, it's not a sealed grave. This is words addressing the general state of this home. This home, even when the doors were locked, is not fully treated like a kever sasum. Why? Because all the door frames are in place. Only when you destroy the door frames does it become like a fully sealed structure. Now they happen to be closed. But the house itself never assumed the full status of a sealed grave. And therefore, once you open one of the doors, you've released the tumah there. This is the one where Seif Tumah Letzis now it has been revealed. And therefore, the other ones are pure. As far as the level of purity of the other doors, there's also an argument among the commentators. Some say it's only from here on out. That anybody who would have sat by the doors when the doors were all closed would still remain impure. Others say the opening of the door retroactively cures all the other doors. And therefore anybody who had sat there before would not be considered to be tamei. The Rambam goes even further. V'chein, so too, in hischil lachter pesach lo hitziyei boy. Let's say you have 4 doors, yeah? But you began to open a 5th doorway, a new doorway. You want to take them out of that doorway. And you begin to form the doorway. Misha yachter arba al arba, hitzel al apsachim kulam. The moment you excavate an area, 4x4 tvachim, able to remove the corpse, you have saved all the other doorways. This becomes the way by which you're going to bring out the corpse. The other ones are kosher. Hayasham pesach sasum. What if there was a doorway that was sealed? Not just locked, actually boarded up. The chashav lohitziyah, and here you plan to take it out of that door. The hischil lepaschai, and you began to open it. So the Rambam over here says, as the commentators explain, these 2 factors together, the fact that you thought about it and you began to open it, once you begin to open that doorway, it saves all the other doorways. This becomes the designated exit. All the other ones are pure. Again, the commentators say you have to have both, chashav lohitziyah and hischil lepaschai. Just the fact that you are starting to open it itself is not good enough until you actually open a space of 4x4. Now that Rambam talks about windows, and there's a very wide spectrum of commentary on how to explain this law, 2 extremes, essentially. So we're going to go with one way, then we're going to go with the other way. First, the Kesef Mishnah's way. Says the Rambam, this is a case of multiple windows. Multiple windows, the windows were too small to have a corpse taken out of them. They were only a tefach by a tefach, 1 handbreadth by 1 handbreadth, less than 4x4. The kulan mugafais, and they're all shut, closed. Kulan tahiris. At this point, all the windows are pure because they're not even able, even if you wanted to, you cannot take the corpse out of them. So even though when all the doors are closed, the doors are all impure, but the windows when they're closed, if they're not big enough to have a dead body taken out of them, they're kosher, they're pure. Niftechu, once the windows are opened, kulan tmeis, all the windows become impure. Not because the corpse is going to go through there, but because the tumah of the corpse can spread through a hole that's wider than a tefach by a tefach, as we're going to learn later in these laws, and therefore the space of the windows automatically becomes impure. But the opening of the windows does not save the other doorways, because these windows are not big enough, again, to have a dead body taken out of them. The implication of the Rambam here being that if the windows were to be bigger than 4x4 tefachim, and they therefore would have been able to serve as an exit for the corpse, says the Kesef Mishnah, even if they're closed, they'd be impure, just like the doorways, because they're all potential exits for the dead body. And once one of them is open, it will save all the doorways. And here you could debate, maybe at least you have to also think about it, like the Rambam says before, im chashav al hachaloin. When it comes to a window, since it's not the normal way to take a corpse out of a window, more out of a door, so at least you have to have a designation. But the point is that if they'd be big enough to have the corpse taken through them, even one of them opening would save the rest of the doors. That's the Kesef Mishnah's approach. The Mari Kurkus understands this line to begin with as talking about windows that are big enough. The Rambam himself is discussing windows that are 4x4. I'm reading it again. There were multiple windows of a space of 4x4. The kulan mugafais, if they're all closed, kulan toheres. Unlike the doors that are impure, because they could all be potential exits, the windows are pure. Because even though they're big enough to have a corpse go through them, it's not the normal way to take a corpse through a window. But once they're open, niftachu, kulan tmeyais, they all become impure, again, for the same reason, the tumah goes through them. Not so much you're going to take the dead body out of there, but they're big enough to have corpse tumah spread through them. And they do not save the doorways, even though they're big enough to host the corpse. Again, for the same reason, because it's not the normal way to take a dead body out of a window. If you had an active thought to take it out of the window, then you would save the doorways, says the Mari Kurkus. Next case in this halacha. Pesach katan b'soich Pesach gadol. We have a small doorway within a large doorway. So, really delete these doorways. Okay, there are no other doorways. Just imagine that. Just these two. A big doorway inside a small one. This is the way the classic commentators understand it. The Kesef Mishnah, the Rash on Mishnayos. The Ravid understands, don't know how he fits it into the words. The Ravid says it's a small door next to a big door. Okay, but we're going with a simple interpretation. It's a small door within a big door. The big door could be opened if you have to bring in big furniture, lots of merchandise. The small door was typically used for people to go in and out. We actually had this concept in the laws of the Holy Temple. One of the gates in the Azara had that structure. It was very big gates. You could open the big gates all the way, but typically what they would use is the smaller gate to walk in and out. So the Rambam says, the question now is, do we treat these two doorways as separate or as one? Remember, there's a corpse inside, and typically the law is, if the doors are all closed, then the whole thing is tameh. Once one door is opened, it saves the other doors as well. So how do we deal with the small door inside the big door? So the Rambam says they're treated like two separate doors. Hamahil al gabe shneim tameh. While they're closed, if a person forms an oyel over, literally it means both of them, but it's actually explained as either one of them, you become impure. Because both doors are treated as full doors, doorways to the home. Chashav lo hitziyei bakatan. Once the person considers or designates in his mind that he's going to take out the dead body through the small doorway, tiher katan esagado. The opening or the designation in your mind of the opening of the small one purifies the larger one. What's the chiddush? Why would I think differently? Why would I think that the two doors are not considered to be two doors? So here we find in the commentaries also a little two opposite explanations. The Kesef Mishnah says one might think that the small doorway should be batal, should be considered nullified in the face of the large doorway, and it should have no consequence. The large doorway is the main one. The small one doesn't contribute to becoming tameh, doesn't contribute to saving the other doorways. Therefore, the Rambam teaches us, no, they're two separate doorways. The Merkeves HaMishnah has the other way. He says one might think that the larger doorway should be nullified relative to the smaller doorway. Why? Because which one's used more? The smaller one. That's the more important one. Tells us the Rambam, no, each one counts for an individual entity, and each one is tameh in the first case, and if one is open, it saves the other one. Hayu shnein mas'imin. Says the Rambam, what happens if you have two doors that are of equal size? And here we have also two interpretations, exactly what this door looks like. Basically, it's a double door. The question just is, according to the Ravid, there's an actual pole that you stood up. It's one big doorway. That's how it's naturally built, as one big doorway. You put up a pole dividing the doorway, and the two doors close onto the pole. The Merkeves HaMishnah and the Rash in Mishnayos, they understand it to mean simply double doors. There's no pole. The doorway is still as big as both doors, but there are two doors opening and closing into this doorway. So now, says the Rambam, same thing. We consider them two separate doors. Hamahil al gabe shneim tameh. If you form a tent over one of the doors, again, that's how we translate it. Al gabe shneim means either one of the two. You become impure while they're both closed. Chashav lo hitziyei be'echad mehen. Once you consider bringing the corpse out of one of them, tier es chaveirei. The one door purifies the other door. What's the chiddush? The chiddush is that we don't say that they should be considered to be like one door. End of the day, it's one doorway. It's the Ravid and the Kesef Mishnah explains. The Kesef Mishnah goes even further. He says a person might think that opening one door shouldn't help for the other door, because since you use both doors so often, maybe you're going to change your mind. Just because you decided to use one door, maybe tomorrow you're going to use the other door when you actually take out the corpse. No, says the Rambam. The thought of one door, that's the door that you decided, and it saves the other door from becoming tamei. Next case. The home had one opening in the north, one opening in the south. Okay, we'll go back to this case, but just try to imagine here it's two directions next to each other, but let's just imagine this is the north, the backside is the south. There's a north door and a south door. Initially, the person decided he's going to take out the corpse in the northern door. What happens in the moment of decision? The northern door now becomes tamei. That's the one you're planning to take it out of. And the southern door becomes pure. However, then his brothers or his relatives came. Or even himself, he changed his mind. And they said, we're not going to take him out of the north way. We're taking him out in the south way. The question now is, can this effect work backwards and forwards? Typically, once you decide on one door, the other doors have become pure. Can you change your mind now and move it to another door and purify the first door, which was already impurified by your thought? Says the Rambam, you can. Tiher dreimi es hatzvaini, the new exit, the southern door, has purified the northern door, ubilvad shelo yardim, as long as you're not doing a trick. You're not purposely changing it to get the northern door to be pure. If you did a trick, then the rabbis imposed the fine and they made them actually both impure. The first one as your initial thought, the second one as your second thought. Quick thing to point out, even in the case where the Rambam says that the change of mind, the southern door becoming impure, makes the northern door pure, it's different than the classic case of opening one door and purifying the other. Because when you typically open one door and purify the other, according to many opinions, you purify it even retroactively. Because what's happening is, it turns out that to begin with, you always meant to take the corpse out of this door. But over here, since initially you did mean to take it out of the northern door, by changing your mind, all we can do is purify the northern door from here on out. We cannot go retroactively. Halacha Gimel, Batim Hapsuchin La'achsadra. We have the following case. I got this picture from the Rambam HaMavur, the Chitrik Rambam. We have a bunch of homes that are open into a space covered by an awning. The Meis be'echad mehen. And the dead body is in one of the homes. Critical point, the home which is housing the corpse also has another entrance besides for the entranceway which opens into the awning like all the other homes. So, im haya darke shel meis, latzes ba'achsadra, says the Rambam, if the normal custom was that the corpse should be taken out first into the area under the awning, harei habeis shar vehabatim tmeim, then the moment the corpse is sitting inside the home, since he's going to come out this front door into the awning, that already spreads the tumah to the awning. And once the tumah is under the awning, it also spreads into the other structures. Now, of course, this is only true if the other doors are open. They're allowing the tumah to come in. But as far as this door is concerned, the commentaries explain, even if this door is shut, since it's going to come out that way, it's like the other case when you have a dead body in a structure and it's going to come out through one door, that's the door that becomes impure. So even if this door is closed, the impurity will still spread to the awning, and from the awning into the open other doors. Being lav, but if not, meaning, if normally the corpse not necessarily was taken out into the awning, then beis shar tamei, indeed the awning area is still going to be impure because it's considered secondary to or subservient to the home, and therefore it carries the impurity. However, v'habatim tohirim, v'habayis Torah, sometimes v'habatim tohirim, the rest of the homes are going to be pure. Because when the corpse typically comes out through the doorway going to the awning, halachically we treat it as though the corpse is sitting in the awning, and therefore the tumah spreads all the way in. When you're not taking it out to the awning, so you can't consider the awning as if it's hosting the corpse. And therefore, the other doors, the other homes will not become impurified. I should point out that the Kesef Mishnah writes, if this door, where the corpse is open, even if you're not planning to take it out of that door, the fact that it's open spreads the tumah to the awnings and then spreads the tumah into the other open doors. Hacheder shalifnim min abayis mugaf. Says the Rambam, another case, similar principles. You have two rooms, one room within the other. The inner room, the door to the inner room is closed. V'nichnas hatuma lifnim derech chaloin. And a entity of impurity enters the inner room through a window. You see, the door from the outside opens into the first room opens into the second room, which has a window. The Tuma came in through the window, right into the second room, but the door is shut. Habayis hachitzain tahar. Typically we say, when it comes to closed structures, all the doorways become impure, which then spreads the Tumah to the next room. Here, no. The outer room will be actually pure. The same way the Tumah came in through the window, it'll go out through the window. We don't have to assume it's going to go out the regular way through the doorway, and therefore it has no influence on the outer room. Halacha Dalid, here we introduce the concept of Tumah Tzutza. We have a grave, and there is a corpse. Says the Rambam, in hakever metame mikol sviva, of this rule, that a grave, a closed grave, transmits impurity to everything around it, is only said, ad sheyiyasham cholol tefach al rum tefach, is if there's an open space above the corpse, of a handbreadth by a handbreadth, by the height of a handbreadth. Afilu higbiya habinyan al gabe cholol tefach ad l'rakia. Then, as long as you gave him some space to breathe, so to speak, no matter how tall you make the building, even if you raised it way above, all to the sky, hakol tameh, the entire structure is impure, lefisha hakol kekever, because it's all like a grave. Hoisa tumah tzutza. But if there was cramped tumah, the corpse is covered directly by the cover to the grave. With no space of breathing space, no space of a handbreadth, then we have the rule that says tumah boikas va'ila boikas v'yirades. The tumah penetrates and splits upward, and the tumah penetrates and splits downward. Which means two things. First of all, the tumah goes way above the structure, but it also only goes in the area directly above the tumah. The ein tameh ela hanegeya keneged hatuma milamayla oy hamahil aleha milamayla. The only person will become impure is if you touch the area right above the impurity or form a tent over that area. Oy hanegeya keneged milamata oy mashahel alav milamata, or touch it directly under, or what becomes a tent, if the corpse itself becomes a tent over you. Aval hanegeya b'tzidei habinyan tar. But in this scenario, if there's no space to breathe, touching the sides of the structure of the grave will actually leave you pure, because tumah tzutza only goes up and down. Halacha hey zaklal gadol b'tumas meis. In fact, it's not only a rule with regards to graves, it's a huge rule with regards to the tumah of the corpse in general, and we're going to come back to this again and again, so please remember it. Shekol davar hametame be'oil min hameis. Any entity of a corpse that spreads tumah through tent, im hayaratzutz, if it was cramped, she'ein lechalol tefach, and it doesn't have a space of a tefach to breathe, the tumah splits all the way upward to the sky and downwards to the depths, and it does not cause impurity from the sides. What's an example of that, besides for the grave? Says the Rambam Ketzad, Krishal Tvua, classic. You have a pile of grain. Oh, why is this pile a funny color? It should be all nice and orange like straw. You have a pile of grain, or a pile of stones, and an olive-sized portion of the dead of a corpse is inside it. Let's say you had utensils on the side of the corpse, right over here. They're not touching it. Kelim tahayim, then those utensils are pure. On the other hand, any utensil inside the pile, which is directly above or below the tumah, Tameh will become impure. Shahatuma baikas va'ila ubaikas v'yeredes. Tumah will split upwards and downwards. If the hole in which this olive-sized portion was inside the stones or inside the straw, if there's breathing space of a tefach by the height of a tefach, hu kekever sasom u'metamim mikol svivav, the pile of grain or of stones becomes like a sealed grave, thereby transmitting impurity on all of its sides, but not above it. Right? Now it's not going to be going all the way up and all the way down. A home or a structure which you filled up with dirt or with pebbles, you have cancelled the halachic significance of this structure. It turns this whole structure into a pile of dirt or pebbles. And therefore, if there's now impurity inside this dirt, it splits upward and downward. It doesn't spread to the entire structure. Any utensils on the side of it, inside the dirt, are pure. You have a source of impurity which is cramped in a wall. Stone wall, there's a piece of tumah inside the wall, no space to breathe. Technically, anything directly above it is going to be impure. What did you do? You supported a sukkah with this wall. 2 more walls, you put the schach on top of it, the roof is leaning on the wall which has the tumah inside of it. Hasukkah tmeya, the entire sukkah becomes impure. Shaharei nasa hakoisel tzad mitzidei ha'oil, because the wall has become one of the sides of a tent that you just constructed. Now what are you saying? Had there not been the rest of this tent here, this wall would not have impurified those that are off to the side. Once you construct a tent over them, special rule, the entirety of the tent becomes impure, because now we look at it not as a tumah cramped into a wall, but a source of tumah in a tent. And a source of tumah in a tent spreads to the entire tent, thereby making impure the entire tent. Just to conclude a small point, the word tumah ritzutza, cramped tumah, comes from this week's Torah portion. By Yisreitzatzu habanim bikirba. When Rivka was pregnant, it says the boys were cramped inside her. That's where the Rambam gets this term, tumah ritzutza. Just an interesting hashgacha pratis, divine providence between the Chitas and the Rambam.